So I'm so pleased to have all of you folks together with us. This is very exciting stuff. We wanted to be, oops, let's just go. You guys are all here, so you definitely have the Zoom link for this. Here's our starting slide.
Hi, it's Nancy here. I'm coming up as Babs, all you can see is me below the neck. I don't know how to change it. I'm moving my camera. Oh, actually, no, I've got a different camera, so I'm going to just put it up. I didn't know it was going to work.
There you go. Brilliant. Awesome, Nancy. Thank you.
Okay.
So we're just doing a bit of an introduction to what we're doing and why we came together for this. So thank you guys all for coming and showing up. This is fantastic. So this Share and Tell actually started with something that is called our Community Catalyst program. And our Community Catalyst program is a piece of work where we were bringing in a network of folks who want to be able to jumpstart their social innovation journey, particularly with a focus on people who are situated in rural Alberta, people who are from Indigenous communities, to be able to give a bit of a jumpstart to ideas that are going to change the systems and really change the world around Alberta. So in order to start, we just wanted to be able to talk about the fact that we are meeting on traditional lands. We have folks here from around Treaty 6, 7, and 8 territory. We have these spaces are traditional meeting grounds and gathering places for Cree people, for Saulteaux, for Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, Anishinaabe, Nakota Sioux, lots of different groups that are here in along the lands that we are. And so we wanted to acknowledge all the many people who are First Nations, Métis and Inuit, and many others whose footsteps have marked the lands that we are on for centuries, and whose histories, languages, and cultures do continue to influence our vibrant communities around us. So like I said, we started out with our Community Catalyst program, which is, many of them are on this call today. And we're actually in the middle point of a kind of a day-and-a-half gathering that was supposed to happen in person and supposed to happen in May. Then COVID happened. So we're doing our things a little bit later along and doing our work online, which gave us a really good chance to be able to invite along more people who are connected to social innovation across the province. So what we started with the Community Catalyst program, I got feedback from them about what they wanted to be able to see in this gathering. And they wanted to be able to talk to people who are real live social innovators, or real live people who are taking a social good and making it happen, whether that's in a nonprofit space, whether that's as an entrepreneur, whether that's in all the different levels of the systems that we're embedded in across the province. And so our information designer, Elise, and I sat down and we did a bit of thinking. We talked to a few of the people across the network to try and come up with some people who were great examples of all of these different ways of being innovative. And we asked for them to come and join us, and a few of them said yes. So we're very excited to be able to have a great variety of people who represent a large number of organizations who are going to be talking with us today. And so we've got 3 of our speakers on with us right now. We have a 4th speaker who's going to be joining us a little bit later. They just had a meeting that was going to run late. So because we have 4 speakers and we have a lot of people, and we said that this is going to be a show and tell sort of a piece, we wanted to make sure that there's time for people to be able to ask questions and network a bit through this as well. So what we're going to do is I've asked each presenter to give us about 15 minutes-ish of talking, and then we're going to have a little bit of time to talk after they present, which may be them just talking. It may be them doing a bit of extra sharing of their own resources. And then after we have 2 presenters, we'll have a bit of a bio break, and then we'll come back, have the other 2 presenters, and then time for us all to just be able to chat and ask all of the different presenters questions and pick their brains and pick each other's brains about ways that we can use innovation to help make our province better. So we are starting with Lisa Graham, who's with YYC Beeswax, who is YYC Beeswax. And Lisa is a social entrepreneur who had a very personal experience that led her to start a business that was very much focused on some really interesting kind of social outcomes as part of the fact that she is an entrepreneur who's kind of fallen into some great things. And the other special thing as well is as part of our kind of day-and-a-half long gathering, we actually sent each of our community catalyst participants some beeswax sheets to be able to make candles as one of our breaks. So we just kind of watched her video on how to make the tall pillar candles, and they'll be able to use those to give them away to their friends and families and whoever they think needs a little bit of a lovely smell of beeswax in their lives. So Lisa, I will pass this along to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that either you can share yours or you can just be the one talking.
All right. So thank you so much, and thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here. And so what I wanted to do today, I wanted to share a little bit about me and about my business, and then leave some time for questions at the end. So make sure you're thinking of your questions. So a little bit about me, my background. I am actually a farm kid. I grew up in southern Alberta, and my family owns a finishing feedlot. And when I was young, I had the opportunity to work for an apiary in a neighboring community. And I had a lot of fun there. So I've got quite a bit of farm experience from growing up. And I came to Calgary for university. I have 2 degrees. One degree, my undergraduate, is in software engineering, and my master's is in biomedical engineering. And during the course of my university studies, I had the opportunity through the Women's Resource Center to do some volunteering on a project. So they were working on, I think there was a fundraising. I can't remember exactly what they were doing now, but they were looking for volunteers to help them make rolled beeswax candles in this awareness campaign fundraiser around the shootings at École Polytechnique in Quebec. Now, if you don't remember these shootings or haven't heard about them, basically the general gist was somebody thought women should not be engineers, so they decided to go through the school and shoot all the female engineers. So I thought this was perfect. I was a female engineer. I love crafting. I've crafted my entire life. I have this background in working with bees. I'd never done beeswax candle making, so I was really excited. So I went to the volunteer session, made a bunch of candles, went back the next day, and they were finished. There were no more candles to make. So I started thinking, I'm like, oh, this is really fun. I want to do some more of it. So I looked around, I found a supplier. I ordered in some sheets. They had 24 different colors, and I ordered 10 of each color. That's 240 sheets. Every candle makes between every sheet makes between 1 and 4 candles. So needless to say, I ended up with a ton of beeswax candles. So I thought, well, I can't burn these in any reasonable amount of time, nor can I gift them, and the people I would be giving them to probably won't appreciate having 1,000 candles. So I put up a Kijiji ad and tried to get rid of a few of these. I thought maybe somebody out there is interested. And what happened with this Kijiji ad, I started to have people contact me and say, hey, do you have the sheets? Can I get the sheets? I want to make my own. And I thought, well, why not? So I started ordering in the sheets, and I kept this ad going for a few years. I'd get people on occasion contact me, and I'd sell them a few sheets, and I didn't really think much of it until I got into my master's degree. I was doing some human-computer interactions research, and I did a 6-week journal study as my study. And that meant on Monday, I would email my participants, and then I would wait until the next Monday when I'd email them again. So needless to say, I was starting to get a little bored. And my boyfriend at the time was one of the founders of a tech company, and I was kind of observing what he was doing, and I thought, hey, this business thing looks kind of cool. So what can I do? How can I create a business? What can I create this business from? And I remembered this Kijiji ad that was working. So I was thinking, I have this Kijiji ad, maybe I can do something with that. And I had made lip balms for my family for Christmas, and they went over really well. I thought it was a fantastic recipe, and they also were made from beeswax. So I decided, well, maybe I'll start something related to beeswax. So I started with the beeswax sheets, the candles I was still trying to sell, and these lip balms. And one of the things I really wanted to do with the business when I started it was to give back to the community in some way. So I wanted to find some kind of a nonprofit or somebody doing something amazing that they needed some support for. So in my searching, I actually found a Calgary organization called Apiaries and Bees for Communities, and their focus is on educating around bees. And I thought, this is perfect. It's local, and they're doing educating. I don't have the time to be doing as much educating as they are, so why don't I just support them? So I made the decision right from the beginning that I was going to donate 25 cents from every lip balm I sold to their educational programming. And that relationship, it's been wonderful to see how it's grown and developed over the years. I get really excited every year as lip balm sales increase. I get to donate a little bit more to their educational programming. And this helps them go into schools and help subsidize the cost of providing presentations. So the kids get to learn a lot more about what's happening behind the scenes. And I'm just so excited that I'm able to contribute to that. So from there, if we fast forward a little bit later on my business journey, so today I offer so many things. I do workshops, I have all sorts of products that I do, and I'm writing a book right now. There's a lot going on. So as the business was growing, I was basically creating products that I wanted to use myself. And this was a huge learning curve. I hadn't gone all into something like this for a long time. My background in crafting, I crochet and cross stitch, and I hadn't really done anything in terms of the bath and body products or the candle making. I made some candles in a summer camp once, and that was about it. So there was a huge learning curve involved. And specifically in the bath and body area, the lip balms that I created, I just tried it for fun and thought I created something amazing, so I wanted to share it. And throughout my journey, I started to learn a lot more about the formulations and especially about ingredients. And one of the key pieces I learned early on, it was maybe a couple years in, was about these things called fragrances. And they're a little bit more commonplace now. People are a lot more educated about it. But at that point, I ran across something that said, hey, these fragrances, you don't really know what they're made from. And the more I looked into it, I thought, this is not what I want to be using myself, and this is not what I want to be sharing with the community. So I took a look at my ingredients, and I decided to make that transition. Health is really important to me. My master's degree in biomedical engineering, I do have a very strong interest in health and wellness, and having these mystery ingredients, I just didn't work for me. So I transitioned. I had 2 flavors. I think I had about 7 lip balms total, and 2 of them had fragrances. So I said, okay, we have to reformulate these, find something different to do. So I ended up transitioning over to all essential oils, and I honestly feel like they're superior products now than when I was using the fragrances before. So there are some drawbacks to it. you can get a lot more variety in your flavorings and everything when you're using these fragrance products. However, I don't think it's worth risking health over that. And this kind of leads into one of the current projects I'm working on. I have recently become aware of the different standards there are in the world. So here in Canada, we have certain standards for our cosmetics, and they are different from the US, from Europe, and Japan. There's all these different standards to follow. And my new project right now is to take all of my Bath and Body products and to put them against the strictest standards in the world. So Europe and Japan both have much stricter standards than we have here in North America. So I wanted to make sure my products are following those strict standards. I want to have world-class products, and I want to keep my community and myself healthy. And I think it's beneficial to look at these very strict standards and to follow them. So that kind of leads into my the preventative medicine stance I take. I think it's really important to be paying attention to what you're putting on and in your body, and you want to do that with products that are supporting you. And my original interest in the health system comes from when I was growing up. I had an ACL injury, and we lived about 2.5 hours from Calgary. So for me to do any sort of treatment or anything, it was a big commitment. We had about 5 hours round trip of driving. And I ended up doing all my physio at home with my mom looking over me, and it was really awful. So when I did my master's research, I was inspired by a community health program for breast cancer patients, where they created this really awesome community. It was very supportive. And I wanted to see if we could take something like that and have an online component that would support people in rural and remote communities. And I still think that's so important. I also used to work at the Tom Baker Cancer Center. I spent a couple summers doing some work there, and I did another project. It was a community health project, a technology product in Africa. And all of these, through all of these, I got to kind of see the back end of the healthcare system. And when I finished my master's degree, I was thinking, well, I don't know. I've seen all the red tape and how people try to make changes and they can't get them through. So I think I can do a better job, have a bigger impact by doing something outside of the system. So the preventative medicine, a lot of that is about education. Education to me is so important. Growing up on a farm and then teaching in the city a little bit, I've seen some of the gaps in the knowledge, and I want to close those gaps a little bit. So people who don't necessarily know what that farm to table looks like, we can educate them about that and maybe give them some small experiences along the way that help them learn about it some more. And this also leads into the respect component. So I think it's so important to respect our resources, our environments, our communities, and ourselves. And all three of these kind of tie in together, and they're all interrelated. And so for anybody who was doing the candle making, just finished the candle making session, I have a little bit of a fun fact for you. And this will maybe make you appreciate your beeswax sheets that you were working with a little bit more. So that beeswax sheet you were looking at that you just used, that is about 70 grams in weight. And the bees have to consume about 587 grams of honey to make that one beeswax sheet. Now, each bee in her lifetime gathers about 0.8 grams of honey. So that means that beeswax sheet you used It took 734 bees to make that for you. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So I think that's how I'm going to close today. I would love to take your questions. Hopefully I didn't go over time too much. And if not, hopefully we have lots of questions. So thank you again so much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lisa. You were actually right bang on time with your time. So we've got a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions for Lisa about how her pathway has kind of gone from a big picture to a little picture back up and kind of where it's gone, or anything about her business. I saw Sharon Heading put her hand up.
Hi, Lisa. That's a fascinating story. I love bees anyway. But I'm wondering, what's your future? Do you have a 5-year plan, or do you have a trajectory that, or some goals that you're hoping to achieve?
I always have kind of aspirational, long time in the future goals. One of the projects I want to do some work with is aquaponics and hydroponics. So I want to do large scale greenhouses and create a really strong educational component. So I want to have seedlings all the way to finished plants, have the fish in there, have the bees in there, so we can have do beekeeping year round. And that is providing the education there. We're also providing food. I want to provide good food to help with that, putting good food into our bodies so we don't have to put a burden on the healthcare system. And I have so many projects in my head. When COVID hit in the spring, that kind of turned everything on its head, and there's so much uncertainty now that it's basically take it day by day and see what's going to happen.
Very exciting.
Awesome. All right, we definitely should have time for at least one more question. I saw Jan Beeston put her hand up.
Yes. Does your business make a decent living? Like, is it still on a growth path to get to that, or have you arrived?
It's growing every year. So the business turned 5 years old this year, and it's been a long haul, that's for sure. I definitely don't make, this is not the only thing I do. I'm also a music teacher, and I'm a session musician. I do some session recordings, and I pick up a few software contracts once in a while. So it's definitely not completely paying the bills, but I can see it growing year over year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we definitely have time for at least one more good, juicy question. And if no, oh, sure, go ahead again, Sharon.
I don't want to hog, but I'm kind of obsessed with bees. So did you say that you were going to actually have hives in your big greenhouse situation?
Yes, I have bees already. This year's been kind of sketchy, but I do have 6 hives right now, and I've been keeping bees in the city for about 4 years. All the bees are urban hives, so I have about 1 hive per yard. I have 1 hive on an acreage right on the edge of the city, and I've got, that's where I put more than 1 hive.
That's really exciting.
They bring a lot of joy, that's for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for what you shared with us. I really appreciate it. We'll have another chance to ask questions of Lisa and everybody else at the end. So I think this is a good time for us to then segue, especially with some of the discussion about healthcare, into Pacer Innovates. So we have, let me just see where I see you. There you are, Nancy. I can see you there. Nancy, we've got Dr. Nancy Marlett with Pacer Innovates, and so she's one of these fabulous folks that I had asked the group with Innovate Calgary, who do you know that's a great social innovation story, who'd be able to share lots of wisdom about what it takes to go through the cycle of social innovation. And Jordana Armstrong there said, oh, Nancy Marlett, hands down. So Nancy's done a huge body of work around what she has with a social enterprise called Patient Innovates, so patient and community engagement research, and I'm going to that they do. So I will stop sharing my screen. So Nancy, and I believe we've also got your colleague Matt in the room as well. So if you want to hop on.
I'm going to try and share my screen, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Host disabled attendee screening, so you have to say I can do it.
There you go. Try it again right now.
Okay. Oh.
So you should have a green button at the bottom that should let you.
Oh, you know something? This is really crazy. I was trying to clean up my screen for today, and when I did it, I've gone off. I had. I sent my PowerPoint there today. Isn't this ridiculous?
Hi, folks. Nancy, I can help you out here.
Okay.
Babs, can you make me a co-presenter?
There you go. You got it right now, Matt.
Okay. You just tell me when to go to the next slide, okay, Nancy?
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. So as you can see from this, the whole idea is social innovation is not for sissies. I'm what they would call an old maverick. I've been beating my head against brick walls since for the last 30 years. And I've chosen to work in systems that people depend on. And right now I'm part of the Cummings School of Medicine. So I'm embedded within the belly of the beast, as they say. And so what I wanted to do is really, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you something that's happening as we speak. After all these years, I'm doing a second book on this whole area of including patients and seniors and people from different communities in the research that impacts their lives. So I'm in the last stages of writing a book on innovating in health with peer research. And peers are just people that actually know what it's like to live the lives that they have. So, and this is a course that is starting in block week with 45 people online. So I'm kind of terrified. But what I've really tried to build is this whole concept of design thinking. And design thinking is a way of sort of hedging your bets. So I just put that up. You can take a look at it. It's all new work. It's all new theory. It's things that have come from all these years of being in the trench and still trying to survive. So maybe we can talk about that later. Anyway, so let's go to what the purpose of today is. Let's go to the first. So what I've done is I've looked at the crucible of innovation, because sometimes I think it's like that. And there are 7 key ideas there. And we can't get through that in 15 minutes. It's impossible. So what I'd like to do is have you identify the areas that you might like to go through. So the first is personal challenge. Oh, Babs, you were going to find a way to, what we can do is
Nancy, if I could get you to talk through your personal journey and what got you going with Pacer. So what was the need that you saw and where you went? So why don't we go through your personal challenge to be able to talk about what brought you to where you are today with the work you're doing.
Okay, so that's the problem. You know, Pacer came from 30 years of work. one difficult step at a time. And so what I've tried to do is condense those into areas that I can talk about. So unless you want me to, you know, I'm pretty flexible. I can change. What do you want me to do, Babs? These are things that, let me just go through them really quickly. And then I guess the personal challenge is all of us need a connection to the innovations that we engage in. And those who aren't engaged or not involved don't have much success at succeeding. And I think for me, I grew up not being able to read. So I avoid being put into special education classes with the conspiracy of a mum. So that understanding of what it's like to be skirting around what's expected of people has been a really important process for me. And my first job when I graduated from university, I was working in a back ward on a psychiatric hospital. And these were 20+ year veterans, women, who've been sent there because of their behavior and their difficulty in terms of living a life. And so that living in that kind of environment and being part of a dramatic social innovation, we were the first token economy in Canada. And the horror of being involved in that has stayed with me. Whenever I go to a new situation to work with, I go back to that. As I go back to every innovation that I've been part of. Each innovation, whether it's that or working with Baker Center, moving very profoundly handicapped kids out of institutions and into school classrooms. All of those things build within you. And each time you figure out, or I'm just going to go back and take up one of these ideas. But that's really has been an important process, and it fits in with the second one. If you're going to stay in it and make a real commitment, you've got to figure out a way to be able to learn the ropes. You have to understand that innovation, you're going to fail. You're going to be taken over by other people. You're going to get caught in that Canadian, what would you call it? A Canadian obsession with pilot projects that come and then there's no more money and then you have to figure out another pilot. And it takes time to build up resistance to all that. Those are very important things that you need to know, that it's not you necessarily. It's the nature of early innovation, and that failure is just as important as success. And so I think that for anybody who's starting off, I think that's really an important understanding, and I wish somebody had told me that, because I wailed over some of the things that failed because they were so important to people. But that's leads us to number 3, which is finding an umbrella. If you're going to be working with vulnerable populations, there isn't a lot of money there. And so you really have to find some kind of an umbrella to allow you to take risks and allow you to have some kind of a support mechanism. And that's why the university was so important to me when I started. Moving into the university meant that I had a home, and I could take risks that I couldn't outside of the university. The thing about innovating in a university is all universities live through grants. And so when you don't have money, you don't. So you don't build up staff. You tend to take on these projects on your own and with the people you can encourage to help you with it. And so the whole notion of innovation within a system is to figure out how to really work with the early adopters. But early adopters are a blessing, and they are a challenge, because within the early stages of innovations, those people become the face of what you're doing. And what happens is that through that face, they sort of decide what it is. You don't have, as the innovator, you don't have the chance to be out there and doing the work, because you have to do the administration and you have to do the research. So sometimes those early innovators, or those early adopters, sort of take the concept and sort of do it in their own way. And that's a benefit, because it's a chance to see things grow. But it's also can be a challenge when you're trying to do the next one, which is trust the data. For me, I don't know if I was born a scientist or if I learned it early, but you know, I've really worked so hard at making sure that I'm always open to the information that comes from those stages, and not just looking at it and asking people, but memoing it. This is something that took me a long time. But with a computer, I can now memo quite easily. I can chat with myself online. But to really think about where things are going and what's emerging, and writing that down, taking time to look at ideas as they come up, and to cherish those, and to be able to go back to them. And I guess the last two are the most important. This whole notion of working on the outer rim. When you're working with vulnerable populations, it's a real challenge. If you're working with them within a system that is also already decided how they need to be served, can be a real risk. So you need to find ways to move outside of the power basis and move the research and the innovation into communities that aren't part of the inner circle. So it means really reaching out to communities and to groups of people that really, they feel no one cares. And for me, that's been one of the lessons that I've been told by my mentors, is that if you're going to really do social innovation where people are suffering or where they're marginalized, then you need to be able to take that on. You know, when you work with marginalized populations, you become marginalized within your own community, your own professional community. And, you know, I don't think anyone who's worked with marginalized populations would differ when I say that. But it's an important lesson that I've learned, and, you know, I'm still learning. I'm still looking for new populations, looking for people who really want to be involved. Persistence, you know, I mean, every one of those projects, and I've done likely over 20 research projects over the last 35 years, and to move forward each time, that there's a new opportunity that comes forward, to put in the energy. Innovation is really not for sissies. Yeah, you work hard, you work long hours, and but it's worth it in the end. You know, I think looking back on a career that has been on the margins, and being a maverick has been fun. I've really enjoyed it. So there you go. So I just wanted to show you that, you know, the whole thing, I had it all done nicely, but you can take a look at that later on if you want. So that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nancy. Maybe if you could also just, we've got a couple of minutes, 2 minutes of your speaking time left. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about PACER right now? What is PACER doing? Okay. Well, PACER is Patient and Community Engagement Research. It's the most recent version of an emancipatory process. And it's what we do is we train patients and community members to become researchers. It's a year-long program. It's now been recognized by the University of Calgary, and it's offered in distance education. And the graduates go on to work with the strategic clinical networks, with research teams, with clinics, with community bases. So it's quite an exciting process. It's in the process right now of being fully integrated into continuing education, because as you can imagine, with a topic about patients and communities, we have people with very little education but lots of street smarts, and people with academic degrees, and just new to being disabled or in the healthcare system. So it is a model of training and of teaching that is very much in keeping with the value of people and making sure that they're supported in learning the skills they need. The other thing that is part of PACER is being able to do research. And that component
is now in the process of moving over to Alberta, so that we've lacked. So that's exciting. It's going to take a little while for a large organization like SPORE to feel comfortable working with emancipatory research. It's not research with surveys and big data. But that's a really exciting move that will have the security of that. The others are innovators. And these courses that I'm developing, this one is for undergraduates, and also looking at a version of this that will be available to innovators in the community who want to work in health and who want to work with students and PACER graduates, like patients who finished the program. We had health professionals and we had clinical researchers, all in the same class, teaching each other about engagement. So that's really where my heart is now. I'm quite excited about moving to the people who might want to do this kind of work but are nervous about it. So that's where I am.
We have a couple of minutes for questions for Nancy and for PACER.
Yeah.
Somebody has just asked, David Giroux has asked, can Nancy speak a bit more about trusting the data, please?
Yes, yes. You know, I think we all sort of have thought of research as a methodology, that it's a way we do it, and that data is something that comes in a package. But it's not. I mean, research is about everyday living and learning how to gather information that is important to what you're doing, and to capturing it in a way that you can share it. So it's making evaluation and collecting data part of your experience. You know, the whole notion of citizen science, which is coming back. It got beaten out of the science business when we went into the ivory tower, being the only place it could happen. But it's coming back with a vengeance. And so really what we're trying to do with I'm trying to teach the people I work with is make your book. I have tons of books where I keep notes, and if an idea comes up, I write it down and say, now how would that impact what I'm doing now? How does it relate to what's going to be funded in the next year? How does it relate to COVID? You know, so that you're forcing yourself to be what we call an inductive researcher. We're not trying to prove anything. We're trying to discover. So to me, when I talk about data, I'm talking about discovering. And that's the essence of innovation, isn't it?
Perfect. I think we probably have time for one more question for Nancy, if there's somebody else who has a question they'd like to ask.
Can I ask one? So I really loved what you said about the what do you call it, out of the rim people. Like you were talking about the marginalized, right?
Yeah.
The marginalized people that you're working with. What's your...
Well, yeah, if you want to go back over 30 years, a whole bunch of them.
A little bit about it. Maybe
Yeah.
some highlights.
Women in a back ward of an institution.
Word. No, for real.
That's about as marginalized as you can get. But no, I've had wonderful students from Indigenous communities. I've done research with them in their communities. I've done, in fact, Henry Three Sons from the Siksika Nation was part of my PhD. And he was a real guide to me. I mean, I finally got the picture that the way white people think is very individualistic. And he forced me through 5 years of fighting over things.
Yeah.
To get the power of having a collective voice and being connected to the land. And that was really important. We ran a PACER group of 4 teams throughout the province. And so we have, I think it's 12 trained pacers from Indigenous communities. And I'm really hoping that they're gonna find ways to really become a force. You know, I know that people from the mental health and addictions CIHR, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, they're really interested in connecting with them, the community researchers, because, you know, research is an economic force within communities. And all you need to do is look at Fort Mac and look, they know research, they do research, as does, Member Troop from Nova Scotia that I'm quite familiar with. They use research as a way of bringing money into their communities and controlling the research that's done there so that they own it and they're part of it. So I'm really exciting about the potential with Indigenous communities, but it's got to come from them. I mean, I wanted to train a group of people who could teach, you know, who could teach the program. And we've got that now. So, I mean,
I would still be interested in that.
Well, yeah, we've got to find a way to do it because, you know, it's not up to old white women
right.
to create this. But continuing education has a person by the name of Megan Peacosh. I can send you her email. She is Indigenous and she is the project manager for the PACER program. So she would be the ideal person to go through if you're interested.
Okay.
And I'm certainly here waving the flag, and I'll do whatever I can. But there's many other marginalized communities. It's not just, but the marginalization in our community is so deep, and the systemic discrimination so profound that thank God we're in the time we are right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's time. It's time.
Right. It is. One thing is, very quickly, I thought you were so inspiring, and I think the most like interesting thing was that I really seen myself in you, in the point that like you know so much and you've lived through so much experience and learned so much lessons that you are still so driven to continue to spread that, because it's like information is the thing that it's the most selfish thing to leave with, right?
Yeah.
Me, like my personal thing is that everything that's going on in here, I wanted to get it out into the world, whether that's to different amount of people, whether that's to one person, whether that's right. I just want it out there so that it can be used for other people. And I think that's the most inspiring thing about you. I really like what you said.
Tasha, I'm going to challenge you here. If you're interested, there are going to be courses, and there's a book that's coming out that I want to have people vet it, to go through it and challenge it. You know, so get in touch.
No.
You know, if you're serious, you know, I can take the time. But the biggest thing I've learned is there's no way out.
That's what I'm saying.
But once you become it's really hard. I mean, I'm 78.
Really?
Right?
But I just think
there's no end to the potential. You know, if there's always another corner. There's always another group.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the great questions. This is the perfect time for us to stop and take a bit of a break, just to make sure everybody has a bio break, and make sure that we're not all straining our eyes from staring at a screen glued to it for 2 hours straight. So Nancy, maybe I could get you and Lisa to pop your contact information, that you wouldn't mind if anybody contacted you for anything further questions or conversation. Just pop that into the chat box, and then anybody who'd like to reach out. And of course, we will have some more time for questions at the end. I did notice somebody asking a question for Lisa already, so we'll save that for our last bit. So yeah, we'll have a quick bio break. I'll see everybody back here at 3:30, and then I have already seen Sharon Heading, who's our next speaker, have her eyes light up at the idea of data in Fort McMurray in Nova Scotia, and so she'll be able to explain why when we get back. So see you folks at 3:30. All right, so it says 3:30 on the dot on my computer, so we'll get going back again. I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Sharon Heading, who's the Arts Recovery Manager, I believe is your title, Arts Recovery Facilitator with the Arts Council with Buffalo. Oh, sorry, you're just on mute. Let me unmute you there. There you go, Sharon, you're good. Oh, hold on.
I have a new title, and it's part of my reveal.
Oh, exciting. Well, I'll let Sharon introduce herself a little bit more with that. Sharon is with the Arts Council of Wood Buffalo, which has recently, it's been publicly released that they've, for a social enterprise project that the Arts Council is looking to put on, they've recently received some funding from the Investment Readiness Project. But Sharon's got a bit of a story about arts and its role in being able to help a community build its resiliency in uncertain times. So I'm going to let Sharon kind of tell her story of that a little bit. She and I were both part of the 85,000 or so people who had to leave our homes in the Fort McMurray and the Wood Buffalo area back in 2016 when the Horse River wildfire happened. And in her role with the Arts Council, she's seen a few other disasters that have happened in this region, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as a major flood that actually led to a very large set of evacuations then as well. So she's got lots to be able to share with us about making it through interesting times using some techniques that are socially innovative. So with no further ado, I'm going to stop sharing on my screen and allow Sharon to tell her story.
Babs, could I call on you to give, oh no, never mind, I thought I had lost it. I'm just gonna put a timer on because I can talk forever. First of all, it's super exciting to be here. There's no point in me telling you my background. It doesn't really matter because what matters are two really neat things that Nancy said. One is she talked to the two places that are in my heart. I grew up on Cape Breton Island. I know Member 2 well. It's an innovator. It's really exciting what's going on there, and it's changing the larger community instead of the community of Sydney affecting Member 2. Member 2 is affecting the community, which is super exciting. That's a rare thing to happen on a reserve, I know. And I live in Fort McMurray. I love it here. I've been here for 18 years. And as Bab said, I'm one of the 80-some thousand people that drove out through fire. That's not an experience you ever forget. And it puts a lot of the other stuff in perspective. All of those things in my past come together for who I am now. So who I am now, I am going to officially steal Nancy's word as a maverick. If I had to describe myself, I would think it would be fair to say, and Babs can speak to this, that I'm known for being very straightforward. I suffer fools lightly. I have all the patience in the world for people who are struggling and none for those who are smart and think they're struggling. I'm outspoken, and I would say it's fairly often translated as annoying, but I'm going to choose the word maverick. That's my new name. And thank you, Nancy, for that. Arts Council Wood Buffalo, I'm a visual artist and have been working in the community and had suffered a job loss because of the fire, but had always been involved with Arts Council. After the wildfire, there was a lot of difficulty for artists in the community. There was a lot of demand on the artists, as there has been, as you've seen in the pandemic, where the artists stepped up. They're the second responders. So after people are taken care of physically, they're safe, warm, and dry, then artists step in to support their neighbors, entertain each other, keep us busy, do any number of things. And there's an expectation that they do it. They're the lowest paid group. They're in that group of all of those people who lost their jobs. Those jobs they lost, those restaurant, those entertainment, all their gigs got canceled. Then their secondary jobs of being waiters and waitresses and service people also disappeared. This is a group that struggles, that's often highly educated and really struggles to make more than $20,000 a year. There was a huge demand on these people after the wildfire to contribute, to help. Once we're all safe, warm, and dry, what do? Oh, let's have a fundraiser. What do we want for a fundraiser? And every one of us have done it. We want someone to give us their services for free, which is awesome. And we all have a passion for things that we're willing to do, but we're asking that most vulnerable group, that group that's suffering and that needs to benefit from this fundraiser, to come up with the services for the fundraiser. We can't expect the arts community to be there to heal the rest of the community until they themselves are healed. That's where our strategic plan came from. So I was tasked with funds from the Edmonton Community Foundation to write a strategic plan for healing the artists in this community. That is where our fabulous opportunity came. Not in this funding and we needed to heal the artists, but in fact, we already knew what the community needed. Long before the wildfire, we were lacking in arts infrastructure here. I had been a realtor in town for 9 years, and in my 9 years of real estate, I had not once been able to successfully find an artist, a rehearsal, or a studio space. Real estate here is outrageously expensive. Even when Calgary was giving away towers in downtown, our main street businesses were willing to leave their businesses empty. This town's only about 35 years old. They pretty much own them, and there was a better tax benefit for them to leave those businesses empty in spite of downtown revitalization efforts. So we're up against a really hard wall here for our artists, because traditionally we know that in struggling communities, there is a post-disaster economy. Sadly, now I'm a disaster expert, which my mom probably believed from the day I was born, but it is actually in my job title now. So in disaster, we know, a good example would be New Orleans. It's classic. After the floods, what did New Orleans do first to bring the economy back? They brought the artists back. They made sure that that heart and soul, that tourism that drives them, that those people were back on track. While everything was still falling apart on the outside, they got into that center core and got the artists back to where they needed to be. Now, we're all not New Orleans in terms of what we do, but that has been proven time and time and time again in every small community, in Gatineau, Quebec. In all of these communities, we know that when you get the arts in first, then people have a reason to come. Arts are what creates community. So, for example, and this is, I do a whole big complex thing on this, but here's a bottom line. If you do what we do with the arts is we measure, and we do always do this in disaster, which is more important, healthcare or the arts, community gardens or the arts, teachers or the arts, when we forget that they're all intricately linked. So for example, the city had a bus tour during art culture days. And it was really interesting because I'm heavily involved in culture days. I'm to notice this bus going everywhere. So I inquired and I found out that this bus was filled with medical personnel that the city was trying to entice to come and be in Fort McMurray. They weren't taking them to site. They weren't, they of course did a tour of the hospital, but where did they spend the day? They took them to all of the historic sites. They took them to the galleries. They took them to all of the things that were happening in Fort McMurray that weekend, and only happened that weekend because of culture days. So why does a doctor want to come to Fort McMurray? Why does a welder want to come to Fort McMurray? Well, ultimately, we're all coming for work. And initially, like everyone else, when I came here 18 years ago, we came here for work. But you have a choice as a community grows. You can be a place to work, which is basically a work camp, and we have them outside of town, or you can be a community. So right now, in this incredibly difficult financial time, when this town is hurting like it has never hurt before, low levels of unemployment, people taking cuts in pay if they still have their job, housing prices plummeting, we still have a community for the first time. So 18 years ago when I came here, you could not get money for an arts project. Now we can. And the reason is because we're a community. If you want to be a doctor, it was fine if you came here as a welder and you made your money and you left. But if you came here as a welder and you got married and you had kids, or you brought your family here after you had a sense of community, all of a sudden we went from being a place of work, or what we call from a boomtown to a hometown. And that's where our opportunity came. So we wrote the strategic plan. I wrote the strategic plan. We went to Red Cross because they had money. And here was our fabulous opportunity. We already knew the problem. The problem wasn't related to the fire, but the money was available for the fire. So, properly written, we were able to get a 2-year grant to have me implement that strategic plan that I wrote under the guidance of an arts recovery working group. So we went to work, once more proving what we already knew. And the joy of it is that we were able to do some things that no one else could do. And things started, as a consequence of this, things started coming to Arts Council. That wasn't any magic about me. That was just the money being there for the situation. So for example, one of the goals, one of the things we knew is that there is no infrastructure. There is no ground zero for the arts in Fort McMurray. We don't have an arts center, an arts hub. We don't have anything. But we also know that there are certain keywords, and we all know this really well, that funders need to hear. And one of those words is incubator, and the other one is social enterprise. So for me, as someone who's been involved in the social profit world for a very, very long time, the word social enterprise is like that life raft. I believe it is the way we all need to look for a successful future. There will be grants, there will be funding, there will be that forever struggle to find the next dollar, find a safe place to be while you're looking for those dollars, all of that. But when you look at a social enterprise, then what you're doing is basically giving yourself a security. You're giving yourself that base to allow you time to look for those things. Because not everything we do has a base where you can go to a university or find a secure job within the government or something like that. A lot of the times, those small businesses that are struggling to get by every day, that were built on the passion of a need, they need something else behind that. And a social enterprise can do that. So we have found Landmark Cinemas downtown had an old building that has been around forever, since the start of Fort McMurray, which is funny because where I grew up in Cape Breton, we have outhouses that are older than some of the buildings here in town. So this building is 25, 30 years old. It has parking lots on either side. It's in the heart of the downtown. I was driving by one day. It was like, stop the car. This is our building. So I called the person who was looking at it. I brought my boss in. We had a really good look around. And the more we looked, the more we believed this was the building. In the meantime, we'd already talked. I'd done a ton of research. And once more, this goes back to the two places that I love. We looked at Sea Space in Calgary, which is held up as a social enterprise that's done very well. We looked at their model, and there was a lot about it that was right for us, but there was a lot about it that wasn't, because we are a very small community and we don't have a lot of big old historic buildings, and we can't legitimately say you really need to put culture money into reviving a 25-year-old cinema. But I also looked at the Cape Breton Center for Craft and Design. Cape Breton Center for Craft and Design, Cape Breton is a community that is struggling post-industry. So when I grew up in Cape Breton, everyone I know, their parents either worked at the steel plant or outside of town in the mines. My parents didn't. They were entrepreneurs. But most people, my grandfather worked at the steel plant. So there was always talk that if they closed the steel plant, the town would die. Well, they did close the steel plant, and the town didn't die. But it did struggle. It looked to different things. And it's always been a resource-based economy. And tourism became a very big part of it. And Cape Breton is a marvelous place for art and for craft. And it's in the culture. It's embedded in all of the cultures on the island. So the Cape Breton Center for Craft and Design was very smart about how they looked at that. They have a purpose-built building right on the main street, what we called the Drag when I was growing up. But they've taken advantage. The model that we're using in Fort McMurray is that Cape Breton is an island. It's a small population in a large geographic area. There are multiple reserves on the island. It's semi-diverse. There's a lot of old white Scottish people there, my family. But it's an amazing community that really respects the arts and understands the arts are given value. So they started looking, knowing that they had this large geographic area and wanting to service that area, which is the same challenge we have in Fort McMurray. We have rural communities here, which equals Indigenous for the most part, which also equals elders, because we're a very young population. Babs can correct me, but I think our average age right now is around 28. The average age in Cape Breton in Sydney is 65. So what we're able to do is look at their model and see what they have been really smart about doing. So large geographic area, small population, but also these little pockets, which here in Fort McMurray generally means, so we have Fort Chipewyan, which is just fly-in. They have areas on the other side of the island in Ingonish and Margaree and Cheticamp that the mountain gets closed in the wintertime. So it's not fly-in, but there are times when you just can't get to the community. They're small, remote, they're having their hospitals closed down, change of services. So they had vacant buildings there. So for example, in Port Hawkesbury, they had an vacant customs and excise building, which they turned into an artist in residence program. So they have a permanent artist in residency, 5 seats. Each of the artists are expected to produce for shops that are in town. I could go on and on about the program, but the bottom line is, if we take Calgary, Sea Space, and all of the things that work there for us in that it is a social enterprise that is working, and they've learned as they're growing what's wrong. We take Cape Breton Centre for Craft and Design, which is highly subsidized, but has this innovation that is working fabulously with their artist in residency program. We take the best of those and we put the 2 of them together, and we come up with the Arts Incubator in an old movie theater in Fort McMurray. And we take that idea to the investment readiness program, and they get pretty excited about it. And we get an $80,000 grant to hire an engineering firm to do a feasibility study for it. Oh, there we go. I'll very quickly just say that the engineering firm is moving along and things are coming beautifully. I believe that you can talk something into existence if you believe in it enough and you just keep saying it. Because as long as there are actions along with those words, eventually the people in the powers that be forget that it hasn't happened yet. They just hear it enough and they know it's a good idea that eventually it happens. And as God is my witness, that is what is happening with this project. I have a ton more stuff, but I think that's the heart and soul of it. And the work in our rural communities, we have been able to make innovation during COVID when we hired 2 people to work in the rural communities. I have not, I met one of them face-to-face in the mall today because she had to come in to bring her child to a doctor's appointment. And they are already working and making a difference in those rural communities in ways that no one else in the community has ever been. And that's not us, that's not Arts Council, that's us listening to what the community was saying and finding someone in the community to deliver it, not being paralyzed by process.
Wonderful. I think we've got time for at least one question there with Sharon, if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask. I don't know if anybody put their hand up or at all. I might have just paused for a second. Just feel free to unmute yourself and ask if you've got something.
It's not really a question, but I love what you're talking about. But I think in the DNA of every innovator is something that's called manifestation. And we manifest things. We talk about it, we get people excited about it, and we just act as if it's there. And then people say, I don't have any of this. And hopefully by that time, it's too late.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Truly, what has happened for us in the rural communities if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, that is the most exciting thing for me, because in the 2 years that I've been in the project, I very quickly learned, and I know you talked about learning from the Indigenous communities, that my timeline is irrelevant. It's nice that I think that it should happen in this time, or that I made a plan for it to happen in this time, that I need to be more respectful of that. And that was a really good lesson for me. And learning that and just going without an agenda and allowing myself to be welcomed in the community and to meet people and share and ask them what they wanted when I was coming and just give it to them. Like, we don't do programming generally, but the clear message was the Indigenous communities wanted programming. So I brought it, and hockey bags full of equipment that I left behind after I got off the plane. And the result of that was a building of trust that I truly respect, because what we do in the arts is about dignity. It's about two kinds of dignity: personal dignity and economic dignity. And by bringing that to those Indigenous communities and learning, and then taking that knowledge back to our community, and having that respect for elders translated into everything we do, and that meeting of the elders and youth, and that passing on of knowledge, that's something that it's missing in every community. And if we pay close attention, then hopefully, I know one of these people that I just hired will have my job, and I'll happily move on to whatever my next adventure is, because it's been a fabulous journey, and it's only just beginning.
Brilliant. Any other questions for Sharon? If anybody thinks of something that they haven't already come up with, that's great, because we are going to have that time at the end for everybody to have a little bit more of a broad talk. And then in the meantime, what we can do is we can move on from Sharon's talk into, I saw Meredith join us partway through. And so Meredith Perrick is part of the Be Local network, part of Momentum, and works with Thrive as well. So these are entities in Calgary that have a really interesting relationship together. And so Meredith is going to be able to explain a little bit to us about what their relationship is and the way that they support innovative groups, innovative social enterprise, including, by the way, Lisa with YYC Wax is part of that Be Local network as well. So we thought this was a really good way to start zoomed in at the start of our event today, and then zoom back out to be able to see a bit of a bigger picture about how the ecosystem is working in that area. So here we go. Let me just stop sharing my screen here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do have a pretty ugly PowerPoint here. So I'll maybe see if I can share my screen here. If not, I promise you're not missing a ton. Let's just see here.
I should be able to make you a co-host if you aren't right now. So give me 1 second.
Yeah, this is entirely my technical incompetence, so bear with me here.
There's a button at the bottom of the screen that says share screen. Perfect.
Awesome. So that's perfect. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. And yeah, I unfortunately had to join today about a half hour late just because of another commitment. And so I unfortunately missed Lisa's presentation, which is really too bad. But yeah, I've just been really enjoying sitting and listening to everything that Nancy and Sharon have had to say. Yeah, like was said, my name is Meredith, and I work with Be Local and Momentum and Thrive. And so I'll maybe just start here by giving you just a quick overview of what Be Local is. So Be Local is a values-based business network in Calgary, and so What that means is that the businesses in our network, like Lisa's business, for example, care not only about making a profit, but also about their communities and the relationships that they hold in their communities. And so we currently have just over 170 businesses in the network. It's grown tremendously since March. And I'll maybe talk a little bit more about that in a social innovation context in a bit. And so you'll see there that photo is just a couple of the metrics of the businesses in our network. It's about a year out of date, and so those numbers would be even higher now. You'll see on the bottom of that picture, it says powered by Thrive. And so we have a bit of brand soup going on here. So the Be Local network is, as it says, powered by Thrive. And so what Thrive is a community leadership initiative that's housed within Momentum in Calgary. And so Momentum is an organization in Calgary that uses economic approaches to reduce poverty in the city. And so for much of the organization, that looks like working directly with people who are living on low incomes or facing some sort of barrier to a sustainable livelihood. With Thrive, what we're looking to do is really get out there in the community and partner with people in our community who are working towards that same mission of poverty reduction and creating sort of a more thriving and resilient local economy. And so, of course, we see businesses as a wonderful and powerful vehicle for making that happen. And so that's sort of the motivation behind our work in the Be Local network. And so when I was just sort of thinking about what kind of story I wanted to tell today, around or that sort of highlights some of the sort of experiences with social innovation we've had. I actually thought that I would focus on our sort of pandemic story, actually. And so Thrive is actually quite new to running Be Local. So Be Local has been around for about 12 years now, but we only recently took it over in January. And so we were just sort of in this period of getting to know the network and the members and really understanding, you know, what some of their needs were, what they would like to see happen with the network. And then COVID-19 happened, and of course, we all know that this had a huge impact on businesses. And so we found many of our members were struggling with a loss of revenue due to having to close and just different consumer spending patterns, as well as there were many government supports, of course, available for small businesses, but many of the businesses were having trouble accessing them. And so that was either due to the structure of the programs themselves and just some very sort of challenging qualifiers that existed in those, as well as just challenges with knowing what was out there and how to apply for it type of thing. And so as a result of these challenges, we sort of observed that the businesses in our network reacted quite quickly, actually, in, first of all, exploring new and different revenue streams. So whether this meant getting online quite quickly, whether this meant, you know, exploring new or different product offerings that were more suitable in this time, exploring collaborations with one another. So I think this is particularly interesting, you know, in a time of really great turmoil, is also really a great opportunity for businesses. And so there is no rule book for operating a business during a pandemic. And so we found that businesses were able to make really big asks of one another in how they're collaborating and how they're working together, and have conversations that they wouldn't otherwise be having. And as a result of those, also offer a lot of generosity to one another in how they were able to support and lean on one another to share knowledge and experiences. And so that all, of course, has little to do with Be Local and everything to do with our members and sort of their own resilience. In terms of sort of Be Local's character in this whole story, we sort of recognized when the pandemic started that it really wasn't the time to be doing all this sort of slow getting to know you, work with each of our members, and that we really had to act quite quickly in order to be in service and truly provide tangible supports. And so we did that just by being as responsive and flexible as possible. And so what that ended up looking like, because of the financial challenges that some businesses were facing, we did offer free membership to the network. Membership is usually $375 a year, so we took that barrier away and offered that free of charge, as well as because of this openness to and reciprocity in terms of the collaborations that businesses were willing to engage in, we really wanted to harness that. And so we began to host community conversations with all of the businesses in our network, both for networking purposes, so that they could build those more of those relationships and become sort of more resilient through those relationships, and also exploring specific collaborations. And so there was interest coming out of those conversations for sort of deeper dive conversations in whether that be specific industries or specific ideas. And so we really saw our role as conveners of those conversations, not necessarily guiding the content, but able to sort of alleviate whatever sort of logistical or time constraints might be on the businesses by sort of setting up and hosting those conversations. I'll just speak quickly to these other sort of responses as well. Another thing we did was launch the Be Local store. And so when the pandemic started, as I said, businesses were sort of exploring how to get online quite quickly, exploring other revenue streams. And we observed challenges in a couple of areas. So one, businesses, some entrepreneurs were, already had online stores or had the skill sets to build those, and that was no trouble for them. Others struggled significantly. And almost all businesses that we spoke to about this spoke to the challenge of delivery. So a delivery system was not something that they'd had to consider before. And now many businesses were driving all the way across the city to deliver like a $5 toothbrush kind of thing. And so it was very, very inefficient for them. And then on the customer side, we noticed that the situation was also inefficient for customers, right? So they're no longer having this sort of centralized place to access all of these locally made products, but having to purchase them through multiple transactions. And so we launched the Be Local store to consolidate all of that. And so members of our network can list their products on the store. Customers can purchase products across all businesses in the network in one transaction. We have one single drop-off point for all of the products purchased on the store weekly, and then customers can pick them all up in the same place. And so we really felt that there was some efficiency to be gained there that would hopefully alleviate some of the challenges that businesses were facing during this time. And then Stuart, so in addition to these community conversations, we also sort of set up a Slack community and offered, so these are all sort of around convening opportunities. We did also want to provide some more, I'd say like tangible, capacity building expertise. And so I did source experts in our community to also offer business coaching to those in our network who were challenged with specific issues or needed to brainstorm around a specific challenge that they were facing. So one of the questions that was posed to me was like, what were some of the detours or the roadblocks or sort of lessons learned along the way? And so in reflecting on this, I guess a couple of things stood out for me. One is that meaningful change takes a really long time. So we have sort of done our best to be as responsive as possible sort of in the last few months here in setting up all of the infrastructure that's required for businesses to thrive and collaborations to thrive and to create a really resilient local economy in Calgary. We of course aren't there yet, right? So even it can take months or even years for something to come out of these collaborative conversations that we're having, for example. And so just really recognizing that when we're working in partnership with our community, that this is a long-term game. And then the second piece that was just really alive for me when I thought about this question was, sometimes the energy dies out and we need to start over with something new. And so I think, that just happens all the time in an iterative and responsive environment. But we also had, many ideas around whatever it might be, the sharing of resources between businesses, the sharing of space, sharing of kitchen space. There was all these sorts of ideas that we sort of invested a lot of time in having conversations about. Where yourself and the businesses involved in the conversation sort of recognize that this is not the path that they want to invest more time in right now, and that's okay. So there were also many conversations that we sort of started and then closed down and moved on to something else. And then I think maybe the last couple of points that I want to just make here, so when I ask, like, what's the point? Like, why are we doing all of this, right? I think what our goal here is to really normalize this way of doing business, normalize community-focused business practices. And so what we're really trying to do with the network is create a movement of businesses. And so this pandemic has actually been a really great opportunity for us in Be Local, in that we, just as there's no rule book for businesses, there's also no rule book for us. And so we were able to be really nimble and responsive and try things like offering free membership, which helped us to really grow the network, and we hope will continue to grow to create sort of a critical mass behind some of these practices. And then the other piece with that is just making sure that we're working closely with our policy analysts in in Momentum and advocating for the policy changes that we see would be really valuable for helping to normalize these business practices and supporting the social enterprise sector and community-focused businesses to thrive. I think that is, oh no, there was one more question, sorry. Do I still have time? Am I out of time?
We're probably really tight on being able to say time. So why don't we leave this slide up for a half of a second here. We'll leave this slide up while people ask Meredith questions, if anybody has any questions, and then we can open up the floor to broader questions for any of the participants.
That sounds great.
I don't see anybody putting their hands up or unmuting themselves. So maybe what I will do, Meredith, is I will ask you a question based on this slide here. Let's talk through those capacity building opportunities for members to deepen their understanding of community impact. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Is that something that is about trying to build a bit more innovation and social responsibility in, or is that aimed more at people who are coming at this from a businessy side, or is this coming more at a side of people who are coming and saying, I have, like Sharon was saying, I want to be able to build sustainability for my community impact, so let's get into the business side.
Yeah, so what that's really referring to is when we sort of opened up membership and thought about, okay, you know, we have this super vague term of community-focused business. What really does that mean? And we really wanted to make sure that that definition was inclusive, so that business owners that were motivated to operate their business in a way that was, you know, community or relationship based, even if the activities weren't yet present in their business, would be able to participate in the conversation and build their capacity to do that. And so we essentially created sort of a charter of values that we have businesses sign on to, saying, you know, they stand by these values and they you know, subscribe to operating their businesses within these principles. And then the work begins of helping those businesses understand what the opportunities are within their business to make that happen. And so we have a series that we're launching in the fall in partnership with Vibrant Communities Calgary to really help businesses understand, okay, how where does my business fit into this? How can my business play a role in the poverty reduction strategy, the Enough for All strategy in Calgary, for example, and helping them identify and implement those opportunities.
Very cool. Does anybody else have a question for Meredith?
Yeah, I had a question. My name is Jerome. I'm in Red Deer, and I'm curious, and I support a lot of rural communities. I'm curious around how this Be Local initiative has been received within rural communities, and if there are opportunities for partnership and different things like that, because I know rural communities are looking at sustainability and how to, you know, revive or maintain their small business and everything like that. So I'm just curious around your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you. So the Be Local network is like a Calgary-based business network, and that's sort of in line with Momentum being a Calgary-based organization as well. With that said, you know, we understand that like Calgary's local economy does not exist in a vacuum, right? And so it sort of serves us all to have you know, resiliency in the surrounding area as well. And so we're more than open to like working and learning and partnering with organizations in other communities and just sharing learnings through those partnerships. I mean, would Be Local ever expand to be like an Alberta-based network? I mean, that's not really on our radar, but like certainly open to partnerships. And we do engage with other sort of broader communities through things like Social Venture Institute and you know, other initiatives for social enterprises that are less local focused. I don't know if that answered your question very well.
It does. It does. I'll follow up.
Okay. All right.
Meredith, I'd just like to ask a question about this anti-racism conversations. You know, I come from a long history of many groups that are systemically marginalized. And it's always intriguing to me that, you know, when we start to talk about it, we sort of narrow the focus. Since it is community-based, is there options for looking at discrimination and especially systemic discrimination across the board?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this these conversations have been like a huge learning experience for us. And so we you know, recognized with sort of the rise in the Black Lives Matter movement recently that you know, in order to continue to be responsive, we really needed to be hosting some of these conversations with our businesses, especially recognizing, I mean, the diversity in the social enterprise sector for those who actually like call themselves social enterprises is actually like pretty dismal, right? And so you know, it's not even just supporting businesses to examine, okay, you know, how do you know, discriminatory practices show up in their own businesses, but also like how do those show up in our network as a whole? And what do we need to be doing as a network to redefine ourselves and sort of remove some of those barriers? So those are conversations that we've been hosting for the last couple months, and like are just now getting to a point where we're starting to talk about like what sort of actions should we be thinking about or taking. But it's been a great learning journey, I think, for us as a network, and hopefully will lead to some tangible we have as showing up as members.
So just to follow up, I come from a disability background, and accessible businesses became a really strong feature of social enterprise a number of years ago. But it took being able to really cross boundaries and to find ways of saying, yeah, I'm not just, yes, of course Black Lives Matter, and of course this group matters, and of course this, but there's got to be some way of saying we're an inclusive community, you know, and to flip that over, because the real enterprise is in including people. It's just in recognizing those who are marginalized. And I think until we can sort of get on the other side of that, you know, we'll still be struggling with, oh, this is the flavor of the month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And even I think of just like, yeah, all of the, I mean, we talk about like all of the language that we use, right? That just, you know, is very centric to our own experiences, and how there are, in fact, many community-focused businesses and social enterprises that are run by minorities or people who are underrepresented in our network. And so, you know, we have to question why are they not part of the conversation, and how can we fix that? Yeah.
Yeah, not just fix. I think it really comes down to us fixing ourselves to be able to open the door to those people who've been wanting in for quite a long time. And I think one of the things that Sharon had said earlier about really spending the time to build the relationships that we can with as many people who want to have that relationship with us, I think is a piece. Is there anybody else who has any other questions? I believe we saw one in the chat box earlier. So it looks like Sue had asked earlier to Lisa if there were any aha moments or surprises that really stood out for her around social innovation.
I guess, so I've been thinking about this question. I'm glad I had time to think about it because there's so much juicy information that I can share in there. What some of the things for me personally, I love to help people. And sometimes I want to help people so much to the detriment of the bottom line in the business. I love to be helpful, but sometimes I might go a little bit too far. And I do have to remember that I do have a business to run at the end of the day. And yeah, that was something, it kind of surprised me about myself that I found. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, being able to find those ways where these pieces of social responsibility go through and self-generate the enterprise is definitely a piece that you can work through the idea of having impact in many different ways.
Yeah, it's all about balance.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to say, but Pacer survived for 5 years as a social enterprise. And if you think it's difficult to do that in the community, you should try to do it within a university structure where everything has to go through 7 different layers of signatures before anything can happen. So it's really nice to not to be in that kind of an environment anymore. No, I love the risk takers who come when you have a social enterprise. That they come out of their little closets and play when they can actually pay for something and be in control of it and watch it unfold. I think it's a motivator that many people in government and in universities and colleges, especially the colleges, can tap into. You know, there's a different way of thinking when you're a social enterprise.
Sharon, go ahead. I see you put your hand up.
Discovered in Arts Council is not a social enterprise. We've just recently become a registered not-for-profit. But one of the things that we can do, and as we work towards becoming a social enterprise and building our arts incubator, is that we can make inroads in areas that other people haven't in Fort McMurray because of just what Nancy said, and that we can risk because, well, one, it's our nature. We're artists, we're at the forefront of creativity. And I keep saying, if we can't solve this, the world's hooped, because we are the creative minds. So buck it up, guys, the pressure's on us now. But we're less afraid of failure because it's not ingrained in the work we do. So if you work in a government department or a university, you have ingrained paralysis to process because you have to work through the process or you get in trouble. You are measured by your successes, where for us and in a social enterprise, it's recognized that we're experimenting. And oops, that one didn't work. Okay, that was a really good idea, but what came out of it? What were our lessons learned? Every project we do has a lessons learned. So, you know, we just did this thing where we matched up seniors in the community with artists to create works of art. The seniors are lonely. We couldn't get them to deliver our arts project because of COVID, but we could do an old-fashioned phone call, and a lot of our seniors didn't have don't have technology anyway. So we came up with the art of conversation, and we learned right away. Some of the matches were good, some of them bad. We had to rethink the matching, but it's gone from one single project with St. Aidan's, who are responsible with the seniors, to something that's going to become an ingrained part of what we do because it's been so successful. And I've had people call me that I know from other parts of the country that are saying, "Do you want to tell me a little bit about this art of conversation thing?" And that's because we don't have that ingrained, inbuilt thing that exists in government and universities and large institutions. We're not afraid to fail because we're not punished for it. So I think that's a big part of social sustainability and about social enterprises, is that people know it's new and that it's a little bit risky and it's different. So that gives us a little bit of a parameter for failure. And for me, that's awesome because you almost always learn from a failure.
It looks like there was a question that came up into the chat box from Jerome. Jerome, if you wanted to pop open, you can ask that in person if you'd like.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I had 2 questions.
Sure.
One is, what's the vision for Fort McMurray as an arts incubator region that you've kind of mentioned? What's the big vision? And then second question is, what did you wish you learned before you started this work on this journey?
Whoa, the second one's the toughest. The first one, our vision was made for us. We ask the artists what they want, and I'm a working artist in the community, so I had a good handle on it. But the biggest vision was for it actually to be the whole community. Because we're such a wide geographic area, we know that the rural communities have been hugely neglected. We really should have been the Fort McMurray Arts Council in hiring those 2 rural arts support liaisons, which we call RASL. What it did was we legitimately now do what even the municipality can't do, and that is we are actually in every community listening and hearing and acting in spite of COVID. As a matter of fact, because of COVID. So our vision is to be able to empower artists. It's flat out, that's it. So that empowerment is different from every artist. That's why the Arts Incubator, the physical building itself, will start in downtown Fort McMurray, and then we will use that Cape Breton model to get something going in Fort Chip and something going in Jambier and Conklin and those smaller rural communities. So the vision was written for us. We just listened, hopefully. And what did I wish I'd learned before I started this work? To listen, because I'm just like straight to the bottom line. I like action. My family know that my thing is like, I love it. Is it Nike? Just get it done. Like, do it. Just do it. I'm a big fan of just do it and learn from it. And you made a mistake, you can always fix it. I had to learn to listen to be successful in the rural communities. I already knew what was happening in the urban communities. I'm a part of it. I'm ingrained in it. I've lived it for the 18 years I'm here. But I had to learn to listen, to zip my lip because I can talk, and allow myself to be taken on the journey. And in doing so, the results are like, I just talked to a young guy in Fort Chip. I mean, they're in isolation. That's a hugely isolated community. They're being very cautious about who's coming and going, but we're doing a 2-weekend hip hop workshop that's getting directly to the youth in that community, and he's delivering it for us. And then we'll use that as a model to take into the other communities, because we asked him, like, what do I know about what young people want? I'm a grandma. Like, I can tell you what a 5-year-old wants, and I can tell you what someone my age wants. And I listen to the young people I'm associated with in the community. But what do I know? I know I know the respect an elder wants, and I know what we're hearing, and I know about traditional knowledge, but I also know the biggest fear we have in the rural community is that loss of the knowledge, and that the young people are lost because they're not getting it, but they need it in a different message. They need to get it a different way. So by listening, I really learned a lot. So I wish I'd learned to just zip my lip and listen sooner.
Really. Thank you so much, Sharon. I think we have time for one last question to cap it all off, and then I'm very happy to leave our Zoom room open for longer if there's any stragglers, but I do want to be really respectful of time. We said this was going until 4:30. Is there one last question that somebody wants to be able to cap us off with? Sharon, can you share your email? That's a great question. Great. Anyone else with a question? Going once, going twice.
If nobody had a question, I have a question.
For sure.
Yeah. So last question, because I'm originally from Toronto, and so when I moved to Alberta 6 years ago, I live in a rural small town, and one of the key things that I'm curious around is, what's your vision? And this is for all the presenters today. What's your vision for the future around that social innovation ecosystem, and what are the opportunities that you're looking forward to, and how we can build that vision together?
I guess I can start. The reason I came to the university is I wanted to get hold of all the goodies that were in there and get them out, and also create enough holes in the university to get the goodies from the community in. And to me, that's my long-term goal. You know, it was really important that we move to a distance education process as quickly as we could, that there's a way for people to learn from whatever community. And so to me, that's, we need to use the places that have resources in a way that maybe they don't understand. But we need to get that two-way communication going. I spent so much of my life working with rural communities, especially with first responders, and that whole mess of an area that is really, well, it's life-changing. And but we don't, the people in the community, in the cities and in the institutions, feel that they know, and they don't.
Yeah, for me, it's connection as well, very similar. So growing up in the rural communities and now living for the last, I don't know, 12 years in the city, I want to create those connections and build those blocks. So it's not as big of a stretch for somebody to go one way or the other. So it's the community and education for sure, and connections.
I think that when I'm a really big believer in bringing people together, like unlikely partnerships. So every time someone is talking to me, I file away a piece of information. A local artist, she is a Red Seal welder, and I did some pretty amazing sculpture work after the wildfire in commemoration. And then visiting a rural community and hearing that they have an underused shop in a newly built high. Hey, why don't I just put Ruth and my rural art support liaison in that small community together, and we can pay for her to deliver a welding class in sculpture to some young students who are otherwise in a lot of trouble most of the time. So just always have in the back of your mind, like, it doesn't have to be traditional. It doesn't have to be, you know, that Suncor is providing money to the youth center in the rural community. Maybe it's just sometimes one individual can make all the difference in the world. So you've got a really interesting artist and you've got some interested kids. Why not throw them together? You know, you've got an interesting elder who loves to tell stories, and you've got some people, some playwrights and some authors who want to write stories. Why not put them together?
Yeah, and just really quickly, I suppose I would echo that those connections are so important. And I think, like, to me, the goal of it all is that this isn't like a sector, right, among all of these other sectors that sort of take up the main stage in terms of funding and all of these other things, right? Is that this is just like that. Having a community focus and sort of a social imperative built into your business is just the way to do business, and it's normalized sort of across all businesses. And so I think that really necessitates strong connections between businesses and sort of building that movement.
Wonderful. All right, well, I think we'll leave it there with our talk. I believe that if I've just got one, I think I've got one last bit that I wanted to do, which is a quick thank you. We've got some sponsors with our programs overall. Social Innovation Canada is one of them. And then we also have support from the Suncor Energy Foundation for our program. So we just wanted to make sure we were thanking our sponsors properly. And then, like I said, I will leave the link open for a little while if anybody else would like to talk, but that's the end of our formal program for today.
Thanks, everybody. It was really informative. I'm back-to-back Zoom all day, and I'm teaching a webinar tonight, so I will say goodbye to you all, but please feel free to reach out. I'm going to be reaching out to lots of you. It's been wonderful. Thanks, Babs.